it was just time to not take anymore. It was constantly abusive, other things going on. There was no control, there was no freedom.
Tina Turner was the queen of rock and roll, known for her powerhouse voice, unstoppable energy, and no-nonsense attitude. But behind the glitz, the fame, and the legendary performances, there was a side of Tina that didn't hold back when it came to calling people out. Over the years, a few big names in the music industry rubbed her the wrong way, and she made sure they knew it. From personal betrayals to backstage drama, here are 6 musicians Tina Turner absolutely couldn't stand, and the juicy reasons why. Let's dive in. The man who discovered Tina and tried to destroy her. But before we talk about anyone else, we need to start with the man who shaped Tina Turner's early world and nearly shattered it, Ike Turner. When young Anna Mae Bullock met Ike in St. Louis in the late 1950s, she couldn't have imagined that her journey into music would lead through such brilliance and brutality. At the time, Ike was already a respected musician with his Kings of Rhythm band. He saw something raw and remarkable in Anna Mae, something he could mold. But what began as mentorship quickly turned into domination. He didn't just give her a new name, Tina Turner. He copyrighted it, locking her identity to his ambition like a chain she'd wear for years. Their music burned with soul and intensity. Together, they produced unforgettable classics like Proud Mary and River Deep, Mountain High, lighting up stages around the world and commanding radio airwaves with unmatched chemistry. To the outside world, they were a dynamic duo, the very definition of rhythm and fire. But behind the curtain, that rhythm was driven by fear. Ike didn't just lead the music, he ruled her life. Every outfit, every dollar, every step she took had to pass through him. His love came with fists and threats, his attention laced with control. And in private, Tina suffered in silence, beaten, humiliated, and belittled until she barely recognized herself. He used music like a weapon and affection like a leash. She was forced to sing through bruised lips and perform with broken ribs, hiding pain beneath glitter and grace.
Well, it was very difficult and dangerous because Ike was a violent person.
He fed her lies until they sounded like truth. No one else would want her. No one else would believe her. And the world only applauded because he made her who she was. For a time, Tina believed it. That was part of his power. How deeply he broke her without ever letting the world see. But Tina Turner was not made to be broken. In July 1976, after one particularly violent night, she reached her breaking point. With swollen eyes and barely more than a gas station credit card and 36 cents in her pocket, she slipped away from Ike's grip. Bloodied and barefoot, she crossed a freeway in Dallas under the cover of night. That image, of a star escaping her own life, is etched in the soul of music history. She found shelter in cheap motels, lived off vending machines, and started again, not as a singer who'd lost everything, but as a woman reclaiming herself one breath at a time. By the time her divorce was finalized in 1978, she asked for none of the fortune they had built together. All she wanted was to keep the name he gave her, not out of sentiment, but because she had turned it into something greater, something purely hers. That name, once a brand of control, would become a symbol of resilience across the globe. While Tina rose from the ashes, Ike stumbled into the shadows. Without her, his career faltered. Plagued by drug abuse, arrests, and the weight of his own demons, he watched from the sidelines as Tina made the greatest comeback music had ever seen. In 1984, she returned with Private Dancer, an album that didn't just top charts. It rewrote her legacy. The girl from Nutbush, who once sang from a cage, now roared from a stage. She built herself. Even in her success, she refused to be defined by him. Tina never shied away from the truth, but she chose her moments carefully. For years, she didn't even speak his name. When she finally did, it wasn't with vengeance. It was with calm, cutting honesty. She didn't need to scream. Her truth echoed louder than any headline. And in that truth, Ike Turner didn't just become a villain in her story, he became the cage she escaped. But if seeing Ike Turner's name on her blacklist caught you off guard, brace yourself. The next name might be even more surprising. Tina Turner and Aretha Franklin's silent war. But not every battle Tina faced came wrapped in bruises and heartbreak. Some came dressed in sequins and silence. Among the most quietly intense rivalries in soul music was the one between Tina Turner and Aretha Franklin, two commanding forces who never needed to raise their voices to make the room shake. Their relationship, once friendly, slowly unraveled as success bred suspicion and respect turned to rivalry. In the late 1960s, as Tina's fame began to rise beyond rhythm and blues into rock and pop superstardom, Aretha reportedly felt her throne tremble. The industry wasn't big enough for two queens, and the air between them grew colder with each passing year. Aretha had long been the undisputed Queen of Soul, a title not just earned but fiercely guarded. She was known to be territorial, protective of her musical space, and uncomfortable when others, especially black female artists, began to receive acclaim on the level she once monopolized. Tina's gritty, electrifying stage presence, blended with a comeback story that captivated headlines in the 80s,
Ladies and gentlemen, no other, Miss Tina Turner!
Drew a new kind of spotlight. Aretha, whose strength was grounded in her gospel-rooted vocals and soulful control, reportedly viewed Tina's fame as flash-over substance. According to whispers in the industry, she once dismissed Tina's vocal style entirely, snapping to a producer, "She screams, I sing." That quote would follow both women for years. Tina, never one to feed the fire publicly, responded not with press statements or rebuttals, but with performances that set stages ablaze. Each ovation became a quiet answer. Where Aretha clung to precision and legacy, Tina chased reinvention, thriving on the edge of risk. She didn't have to say anything. Her resilience, her ability to rebuild from ashes and walk into arenas as if she owned them, was her loudest reply. Behind closed doors, the divide was more than just stylistic. In 1983, a high-profile duet offer placed both women at a crossroads. Aretha was eager. Tina walked away without a word. No press drama, no back and forth, just silence. Because Tina Turner didn't fake chemistry, not even for a career boost. That moment solidified what many already sensed. These were two empires that would never merge. Even their rare public appearances together were tinged with frost. Smiles were scarce, conversations non-existent, and the mutual acknowledgement between them barely visible beneath their rhinestone exteriors. The rivalry reached an unspoken peak in 2008. Aretha sang at President Barack Obama's inauguration, her voice echoing across the National Mall in a moment many saw as historic. But Tina's name re-entered the same celebratory space when Oprah Winfrey tapped her to perform at a private post-inauguration party. It was a choice that, by some accounts, deeply offended Aretha. For her, it wasn't just a booking, it was a challenge to her legacy. She viewed Tina's crossover success, her ability to dominate not just soul but rock and global charts, as encroachment. Tina never answered those critiques out loud. When asked about Aretha, she kept it brief. "We're different." That was enough. No comparisons, no need to fight. She didn't argue for her worth. She simply kept rising. Then there was the man who vowed to elevate her, only to abandon her when she needed him most. Tina Turner and Phil Spector's exploitative collaboration. Following her rise from adversity, Tina Turner faced yet another betrayal, this time from the man many saw as a musical genius. In 1966, Phil Spector, the producer behind the iconic Wall of Sound, saw something extraordinary in Tina's voice. He promised her the world, studio time, creative freedom, the chance to craft a monumental track. To Tina, it was a dream come true. Spector wasn't just a producer, he was a kingmaker. His reputation preceded him, and to be chosen by him was validation. But when the time came for their collaboration, Spector vanished without a trace. No call, no explanation. He chose another artist, Ronnie Spector, leaving Tina in the dark. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional, and the silence that followed was the loudest rejection she could ever receive. Tina, always the professional, had already made preparations. She had rearranged her schedule, dedicated herself to rehearsals, and honed her voice to deliver the powerful performance that Spectre had promised to showcase. But, with no word from him, she learned through industry gossip that the opportunity had slipped away. For Tina, this wasn't just a missed chance. It was a brutal humiliation. Yet, she didn't voice her frustration or anger in the media. Instead, she responded with the only weapon she had left: silence. When later questioned about Spectre in interviews, she chose not to lash out. The quietness of her response carried more weight than any words could. It wasn't the first time Tina had encountered the darker side of the music industry. In 1966, when Spectre first approached her and Ike Turner to record River Deep, Mountain High, it seemed like a chance for Tina to rise to new heights. Ike was paid a substantial sum to stay away from the studio, and Tina was left to face Spectre's controlling nature alone. Under his command, every note had to be perfect, with Tina pushed to her limits in endless takes. Spectre's obsession with her voice turned her into an instrument, not a collaborator. Despite the immense pressure, River Deep, Mountain High became a masterpiece, showcasing Tina's raw power and vocal prowess. Yet, when the song failed to chart in the US, Spectre, unable to handle the blow to his ego, retreated into silence. For Tina, it was another lesson in the industry's volatility. Years later, when Spectre's darker personal life became public knowledge, Tina refused to comment on his conviction for murder in 2009. Her silence then, as it had been before, spoke volumes. By then, Tina had stepped into her own power, far removed from the men who once sought to control her. River Deep, Mountain High stood as both a testament to her strength and a reminder of the emotional toll she had endured. But as she distanced herself from Spectre's silent manipulation, another name, once held in deep admiration, slipped quietly onto her mental blacklist, leaving a wound not of bruises or betrayal, but of casual cruelty, wrapped in laughter. Tina Turner and David Bowie, the line that was crossed. David Bowie had once been one of the few artists Tina respected without question. He wasn't just a flamboyant rock icon. He was someone who had stood up for her when others wouldn't. Back in the early 80s, he reportedly used his own influence to pressure Capitol Records into giving Tina a proper contract, insisting they recognize her rebirth as a solo force. For Tina, who had just begun to rebuild herself after escaping Ike Turner's violent grip, Bowie's support had seemed sincere. That kind of loyalty wasn't common in the industry, and she didn't forget it. Their stage presence together sizzled. Two stars who knew how to own a crowd. In 1985, their duet of Tonight in Birmingham was unforgettable, and a moment from that concert, Bowie kissing her playfully, first on the lips, then provocatively on the stomach, spread like wildfire. Some saw it as theatrical flair, a typical Bowie antic, but for Tina, the gesture wasn't just unexpected, it stirred something uncomfortable. She laughed in the moment, professional as ever, but privately, it sat wrong. In her world, nothing that reminded her of public control or humiliation could be easily dismissed, even if it came masked as charm. Still, it wasn't that moment alone that closed the door. The real break came during a late-night party not long after. Bowie, intoxicated and surrounded by admirers, cracked jokes about the music industry, about fame, and then about her. He referenced her past with Ike, suggesting, in jest, that it had built her character. The room fell silent. Tina didn't react outwardly. She simply smiled, the kind of tight, practiced smile that camouflaged fury. But inside, something snapped. That wasn't just a joke to her. It was a scar being poked for sport. He claimed it was harmless banter, just words thrown out in a haze of drink and ego. But for Tina, words mattered, especially when they came from someone she thought understood. She didn't call him out, didn't make a public scene. She just quietly stepped back. No interviews, no statements, just distance. And when fans hoped for another collaboration, when producers pleaded to reunite two legends on stage again, she refused. For Tina Turner, strength meant drawing lines, even through admiration. Bowie's name was never cursed, only closed off, part of a chapter she chose not to revisit. But while Bowie had shattered her admiration with one careless moment, The next name that stirred a storm in Tina's world didn't insult her outright. She simply mirrored her too boldly and failed to bow where it mattered. When the stage wasn't big enough for two queens. By the mid-1980s, Madonna was a wildfire. With every leather outfit, explosive performance, and headline-grabbing stunt, she was rewriting pop stardom, and the world noticed the resemblance. Critics praised Madonna's daring stage presence, saying she was channeling Tina Turner. But to Tina, the resemblance felt more like a rewrite, one that erased her battles, her reinvention, her grit. Tina wasn't threatened by the homage. What burned her was the silence that followed it. No nod, no acknowledgement, just a whirlwind of interviews where Madonna brushed off older female artists as irrelevant and out of touch. Tina, then in her 40s, was charting hits, selling out arenas, and living proof that survival didn't just mean existing, it meant thriving louder than ever. But when Madonna's words reached her, they didn't land as youthful arrogance. They cut deep, as if Tina's hard-won legacy was being dismissed before her eyes. She didn't clap back in interviews. She didn't need to. Private Dancer was climbing charts and winning Grammys. Her music spoke where words weren't needed. But behind her unwavering grace, the chill between them set in. They crossed paths only once that truly mattered. A star-studded gala in 1992. Cameras flashed, diamonds sparkled, gowns swept across the floor. And in that glittering moment, two icons stood mere feet apart. They didn't share a smile, not a glance, just silence. The kind that doesn't scream, but stings. Tina, who had built her comeback on dignity and demanded respect with every note she sang, didn't offer second chances to those who denied it. The tension between Tina and Madonna wasn't tabloid drama. It was deeper, a silent clash of eras, values, and paths, paved with different costs. Tina had clawed her way through abuse, racial barriers, and industry gatekeeping to claim her throne in rock. Her performances were forged in pain and delivered with unshakable soul. Madonna, by contrast, sprinted into fame with controversy as her fuel, owning her sexuality, flipping societal norms, and often winning applause for the same boldness that might have ended Tina's career decades earlier. Tina never named Madonna in criticism, but her tone, her interviews, and her absence from shared spaces spoke volumes.
In interviews, Madonna dismissed older artists as out of touch.
She'd often say that every step she took on stage was earned, that authenticity mattered more than spectacle. Industry whispers suggested Tina found Madonna's theatrics shallow, disconnected from the kind of truth Tina had bled into her music. By 2008, as Tina stepped out of retirement to dazzle at the Grammys alongside Beyoncé, Madonna was present in the crowd, but once again, there was no public connection between the two. No tribute, no embrace, just distance. Quiet, but deliberate. Their tension was never loud. It didn't need to be, because for Tina, silence was sometimes the clearest boundary she could draw. But what did Tina's silence really hide? And how did one band push her patience to the edge? Stay glued. Tina Turner and Elton John's explosive rehearsals. Just when the silence between distant icons seemed like the loudest noise in Tina's world, along came another storm, this time in the form of Elton John, a showman just as bold, just as brilliant, and just as unyielding. Their paths collided in the mid-1990s during rehearsals for a highly anticipated joint performance, which was supposed to be a dazzling display of musical royalty, turned almost instantly into a battlefield of clashing wills. On paper, it looked like a dream collaboration, Elton with his flamboyant flair and piano wizardry, Tina with her unshakable presence and storm-force vocals, two forces from different galaxies meeting in one show. But reality didn't follow the script. From the moment rehearsals began, sparks flew, and not the kind that light up a stage. Tina, ever the perfectionist, demanded sharp cues, exact timing, and unwavering focus. Elton, used to leading his own orbit, bristled at being corrected. When she told him his playing lacked polish and his style looked disheveled, he cracked. He snapped back, accusing her of acting like a tyrant in heels. What followed wasn't music, It was shouting, slamming, and at least one shattered mic stand that never made it to the show. Those who were there said the air was thick with fury, both icons unwilling to yield. Tina didn't mince words, but she didn't repeat them in public either. Her silence was cutting, the kind that closed doors and turned pages. Elton, less quiet, carried the grudge for years. In his memoir, he described her as unbearable during that period, controlling, condescending, and critical of everything from his stage presence to his hair. But this wasn't just about egos. Tina had spent decades carving a place in a world that tried to box her in. After years under Ike's thumb and endless battles for respect, she'd built an empire on precision and discipline. For her, rehearsals weren't just routines. They were rehearsals for war. Every note had to hit with purpose. Every step mattered. Elton, meanwhile, was no student either. He was a maestro in his own right, and having someone micromanage his craft struck a nerve. The performance, expected to be unforgettable, never happened. The tension proved too much. In the years that followed, Elton occasionally softened his tone, but the resentment never quite dissolved. Tina never looked back. Those close to her said she found him dazzling but draining, a man who confused spectacle for substance. And as her heels clicked away from that final rehearsal space, she left behind yet another fire she refused to put out. But what do you think really caused Tina and Elton's fiery fallout during rehearsals? Clashing egos or deeper scars? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.